Hi, let's talk about what I'm going to read in January and in 2025. Hi, I'm Colleen. If you're new here, I talk about books and writing. In the description, I always put links to my newsletter, books I've written, all that fun stuff. I'm sorry, it's like very weird lighting right now because it is very dark outside. So I have like some overhead lighting over there and lamps, and I feel like the shadows on my face are crazy looking. So I apologize. Let's talk about what I'm going to read in January, but also how I'm going to structure my reading in 2025. I decided that instead of just having my TBR be like a little bit of like a crazy jumble, which is what I do most months, and then it ends up being like some months I read like 7 romance novels, and then some months I read like 5 book of the month picks. I decided for the first 5 months, I'm going to stick with this and then I'll reevaluate. I'm having like literal categories I have to fill for my TBR. And they are as such. First off, every month I want to read 2 romance novels. I just got a ton of mass market historical romance novels for Christmas. So I have a big pile of print romance novels. I also have a lot on my Kindle. So I want to read at least 2 a month. And I feel like that will help me because sometimes when I go a couple months without reading a romance novel and I feel like very bogged down by the world. So I think that if I make it that every month I'm reading 2, and there would be wiggle room for more, which we'll get to in a minute, then I'll feel a little bit better, just in general. Now, after that, to balance the joy, I am going to have 1 really long book on my TBR every month. I do not have to finish it. So that's the key. I think I've gotten so intimidated by long books, which is crazy. I used to read such long books, but I've just gotten so intimidated by long books in my 40s that I've really shied away from them. And so my plan is that I have quite a few really long books on my TBR shelf upstairs. And maybe at one point I'll do a video about all of them. But I am going to read part of a long book every month. And you'll see which one I have on my TBR for January. But I'm not going to stress. I'm not going to stress if it takes me 2 months. I'm not going to stress if it takes me 3 months to read a 600-page book. It is what it is. I will take as long as I want, but I will get some reading done of it. And I'm also going to start allowing myself on my wrap-ups to be like, hey, also I read 200 pages of this book that I didn't finish, so that I don't feel like bad when I've only read 5 books, when I've actually read, 5 books plus 200 pages of very long book. After that, I'm going to have 1 hard copy wild card. So it's a non-romance. It's not a super long book. It's just a hard copy book off my TBR. That's a wild card. I have a lot of like historical fiction, lit fic, I can't think what, a fantasy up there that tends to just sit because those tend to be the ones it takes me a long time to pick up. So I'm going to read at least 1 of those a month on my TBR to get me reading some of those books that tend to get forgotten for months. I'm also going to read 2 to 3 book of the month picks. I want to stay better on top of my book of the month picks this year compared to years past. I'm also getting low on credits for the first time in like 2 years, which doesn't mean anything because every once in a while, one of my book of the month videos that has like a sign up link in it will like get a huge resurgence of people watching it. And then I always get like a bunch of people to sign up, which is how I get my free credits. But I tend to buy 2 or 3 a month. Some months I skip. I just want to stay more on top of my reads because if you followed along this fall, a lot of the months of this fall, I was reading books that I had gotten in like April or May. And I'm at the point where I've completed all but 1 of the books I bought in 2024. And we'll talk about that book in a minute. And then I will feel very good about completing all the books I got last year. And I want to stay more on top of it. I don't want December 2025 to be a lot of book of the month books, which is what December 2024 was. It was like 3.5. Then I always want to have an ebook. And that's mostly because I have a hard time falling asleep and I have a husband who goes to bed about an hour earlier than I do. And so I like to read on my Kindle until I basically can't keep my eyes open, which is what I do. That's what I did last night. Just read and read and read until I couldn't keep my eyes open. And also I have a lot of books on my Kindle right now, and that ebook slot can be taken by ARCs. It can be taken by a 75-page lumberjack romance novella I got. So it's a pretty open category. And then beyond that, I'm allowed to put whatever I want in there. So let's say it's a month that I'm caught up on my book of the month and I decide to skip. I'm definitely gonna throw some more probably wild cards in there. Maybe I'll get more of a really long book read. Maybe I'll throw another romance novel. Maybe I'll read a bunch of ebooks that month. So I'm giving myself a lot of wiggle room. I'm not doing like a strict schedule, but I did want to give myself a little bit more of like parameters so I would do better at completing all the unread books I have on my bedside table, which is, I don't know, it's over 50. It's so many. So now let's talk about what I'm gonna read in January with those rules. Let's start with the romance novels I'm gonna read. A Good Debutante's Guide to Ruin by Sophie Jordan. I am almost done with this because I couldn't film until today's January 6th. So I actually haven't read that much the last 6 days. I read so much in December that I kind of just been taking it easy and getting some writing work I needed to get done. But I'm on page 300 of this already, and it's 375 pages. And I'm gonna finish this before my kids get home from school today because that is what I need in my life right now. Just some quiet time. So that's my first romance novel of January. My second one, I'm doing The Witch Collector by Teresa Weeks. This has been on my TBR for a very long time. I bought it in May, knowing that I was gonna wanna read it in winter because it's got those winter vibes. I'm just looking right now to see how long this is. 343 pages, so it's not that long. It's a romantasy about, like, I think a witch hunter and a witch. We'll see. People love it. So I'm gonna love it, I think. I hope so. Ooh, is there a map? Everyone here knows there is. Everyone knows how I feel about maps. I love a good map. So I am gonna take a break from romance after I read A Good Debutante's Guide to Ruin and read one of these other things I've got going on because I read so much romance at the end of December. You'll see in my December wrap up, which I will film at some point, but it was a lot of romance. So after I finish this one, I'm going to take a little bit of a breather from romance, and then I'll read this one probably around mid-month. Let's talk about my really big book I'm going to read in January. It's The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I started this in December. I really wanted to be halfway done with this by the time January started. I'm not. I'm about a third of the way done with it, which isn't terrible. It is what it is. I like this book, but it is slow and it is dense. The hardest thing I'm having about actually getting this book read is that I do not love when I cannot read a chapter to completion and then mark it. So her chapter lengths are like 50 to 200 pages. So that's hard for me. The next chapter, which I really wanted to read before January 1st. So I'm on page 172 and the next chapter ends on page 269. So it's almost 100 pages. And I know and that will get me to there's book one and book two. It will get me to book two, which I think is it's not halfway, but it's getting closer to halfway. It's like 559 pages long. I really like dark academia, but I am finding while reading this that I think I prefer dark academia when it's written as a thriller than when it's written as a lit fic, because it's just a little bit more dense and a little bit harder to like keep your attention on. I put up a picture of this book on my, I have like a personal Instagram where I can like put up pictures of my children and stuff like that. And my mom commented, I read this book when we lived in X house because we moved a lot around when I was a kid. And I was like, oh, when I finish it, we'll talk about it. And she said, I did not like it, which doesn't surprise me at all because it doesn't seem like her vibe at all. But so my plan is I don't think I'm going to finish this in January, if I'm being completely honest with myself, which I'm trying to be. So what I would like to do is read 2 chapters, maybe 3 chapters. So we're going to see how many pages that would be. So if I read 2 chapters in January, that would be 200 pages. And actually but the next chapter after that is super short. It's only 45 pages. So maybe I'll read 3 chapters and then just leave that one last, actually it'd be 2 more chapters. The last chapter and the epilogue which that one chapter and epilogue would be 140 pages for February. We'll see. We'll see. One of my friends who's very literary said to me, she was like, I'm going to be honest, I couldn't finish that book. And she's like, and The Goldfinch is one of my favorite books I've ever read. She's like, please tell me you'll read The Goldfinch. And I was like, I don't know if I can do another Donna Tartt. I want to finish The Secret History. Maybe I'll read The Goldfinch in like 5 years. Moving on from big, long books that are going to take me forever, we have our wild card category. And I actually brought down a couple books because I'm not exactly sure what I want to read for my wild card. Whatever I do choose to read, I'm probably going to read next because I think this is the vibe I'm going for next. Actually, my book of the months are going to come this afternoon. So either this or book of the month. So my 2 wild card choices are Faithful by Alice Hoffman and The Great Believers by Rebecca Makkai. So I'm using my wild card to be like my heavy book also, like my emotionally heavy book. I don't want to read more than one. Well, maybe like 2 is fine. Emotionally heavy books a month, trying to keep it light, trying to keep it easy breezy. So I'm going to pick one of these to read next. And honestly, whichever one I don't pick is probably going to be my wild card for February. So these books are going to get read in the next 2 months. But I don't know which one. I'm kind of in an Alice Hoffman mood. I do feel like tonight before I'm going to bed, I might be like, this. I'm going to put them both on my bedside table. So we'll see. Magical realism, historical fiction. Probably going to make me cry. Probably going to make me cry. They're both probably going to make me cry. So yeah, we'll see what I decide to go with. And then I also put 1,000 Mornings by Mary Oliver, which is a book of poetry on here. This is going to be, it's like a wild card, but I figure I'll probably finish all my other reads before I read this one, or I'll just like read a poem or 2 before bed, or maybe, who knows, maybe I'll just want to pour through this over and over again. It'll become one of my new favorite books of poetry. I hope that happens. I currently have my Kindle read going. I started it a couple days ago. I'm going to open it up so I tell you the correct author. And it is North is the Night by Emily Rath. And I'm 20% in and I'm enjoying it. I picked it up because it's a fantasy with Finnish mythology in it. I go through like weird obsessions with different countries. I'm like really into Finland right now, which is such a weird thing to say. I went to Finland on my honeymoon, loved it. One of my kids is like oddly obsessed with us going to Finland at the moment. My husband's like, we're not taking our 4 small children to Finland when there's not a grandparent there to help us once we get there, which I agree with. But I'm liking it so far. It's 2 young women who are best friends, and one of them gets kidnapped by the goddess of death and taken to like her realm, which is terrifying. And the other one is trying to save her friend. And I do think that they are in love because I remember reading that this had like queer love in it, and they're the 2 main characters. They're the 2 narrators. So can't imagine they're going to introduce a different love story because they seem like they really love each other. So far, the setting is great. The mythology woven in is amazing. I'm really enjoying it a lot. I think it's going to be a duology, if I remember correctly. So it's not a standalone, but hopefully it doesn't end on a terrible cliffhanger. We'll see. We'll see, but I'm liking it so far. And then lastly, I have my book of the month picks. I did get 3 this month. And actually, I'm just looking and my account is still saying pending shipping. I thought my books were coming today. Maybe not. It is very snowy, treacherous roads here. So I picked 3. It was one of those where there was an add-on I really wanted. And there was a backlist that I wanted too. So I was like, well, I should pick one. I should pick a book of the month so I can get these and don't have to wait. But book of the month I picked was A Killing Cold by Kate Alice Marshall. And I read What Lies in the Woods by her, which I did really like. I like to have a thriller. I tend to get a thriller from book of the month most months. Like I either pick a backlist one or I pick one for my book of the month just because I do like to read a thriller a month. And then I picked A Sea of Unspoken Things by Adrienne Young as my add-on. I really like Adrienne Young. She's such an interesting author because her books don't fly by when you're reading them. They're kind of like medium pace, quiet, fantasy, magical realism. This one is called The Sea of Unspoken Things. I don't know much about it. I remember reading it. I didn't do a books I'm excited about for January because December was just too busy. But I had started working on one of those videos and that book was like number 1 on my list. So I am looking forward to reading that. And then lastly, I got Ninth House by Leah Bardugo. I was in a very heavy dark academia mood, and put it in my box well before the picks came out. It's one of my best friend's favorite books. And so I was like, I do really want to read that. Also, I will do my review of how my year 2024 book of the month looked. And I do think I need to go do better about picking some of their older titles that are like very popular books, and I'll talk about in that video. Why? So I did pick 3. Now, the only thing is I will give myself a caveat that I don't have to read Ninth House this month or even next month if I am just feeling too dark academia outed, like too much dark academia after reading so much of The Secret History. I know Ninth House has more of a fantasy feel where The Secret History is not. It's like lit fic through and through, contemporary world, like 100%. We'll see how I'm feeling. I did say, I want to read 2 to 3 book of the month picks a month. Also, I'm guessing with sometime in the next couple months, I will skip a month. And so then I could get Ninth House read. So looking at that, I'm guessing I'm probably going to read around 8 or 9 books in January, which is middle high for me. I feel like 7, 8 is normally what I read in January, but I also have a lot of work to do, but I'm also being kind to myself when it comes to my work and allowing myself to, do things like enjoy reading. If you're still here, thanks for hanging out for a long time and watching this. What are you most excited to read in January? Do you have a new book that you can't wait to read? Do you have an old favorite? I mean, a lot of the books on my TBR this month are backlist, with the exception of 2 book of the months, and I have 1 arc that I'm reading, North is Night. So 3 books on this are not old, but the rest are old. Yeah, pretty old. I mean, even The Witch Collector, that came out, I want to say like 3 or 4 years ago. So it's not a brand spanking new TBR, but it's mine and I'm happy about it. If you made it this far and you don't want to tell me what you're reading in January, but you want to let me know that you did, give me a big stack of books emoji in the comments. And as always, I hope you're in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. I'll see you soon.